everybody. Thank y'all for coming. My name is Calvin. I've been in the guild since about 2007, so 14 years now. I've had the pleasure of being on the board the last 3 years or so. There's so many people that do a million times more than I do. I feel like I'm just always running between my job and all the activities and stuff. So it's nice to be able to come here and demonstrate. So this morning, I'm going to show how to build a cabriole leg. And you might be saying, what is that? Most of you know what it is, but this was a form that kind of came into fashion in kind of the early 1700s, if you will, maybe even a little bit earlier than that, and was popular really until, around 1800. There was lots of sort of flourishing art around this time, coming out of the Renaissance, and there was a famous philosopher, or whatever you call him, named Hogarth. He called it the line of beauty, which is a curve, and then it started showing up in furniture. So it's really not that tough to build. There's a lot of systematic steps, if you will, and that's what I'll go through today. So really, it's just a curved leg. You see it a lot in Queen Anne furniture. You see it a lot in Chippendale furniture. Not super popular. You might see it in French furniture, and all of them have the knee and the ankle. Many times the foot is different. So you see here, this is obviously more of a Chippendale piece. You see it ends up with the ball and claw foot. So it's just a way to terminate it. The decoration doesn't matter. You can decorate it with acanthus leaves or a shell or nothing. This is a class that I've actually taught at the guild a couple of different times. This one is a class my dad taught, and you see this is Queen Anne furniture. Much simpler, but you've got the exact same curve. You got a knee, it goes down to an ankle, and it ends in a pad foot, which is pretty common. Sometimes you would do a slipper foot would be common, which would kind of comes to a point. Sometimes you would have elaborate ones that would be more like a dolphin foot or a scroll foot. Scroll foot would think more European, especially like French. It's a very elegant way to finish these chairs, any of these legs. Sometimes if you get like out into the country, the hinterlands, the vernacular furniture like in Connecticut or Shenandoah Valley, Virginia, Lancaster, some of these places you end up with really exaggerated forms. It's kind of like the country carpenter went to the city and saw some things, and he said, man, that's cool, and got back a few hours away, which is, a few hours drive for us might be days worth of travel, and he starts to build, and you see some of the really sort of interesting pieces that are really kind of bandied legs or crazy forms. So the ones that I typically do are based on furniture. Yeah, this is something that I these are actually mine from years ago, and I'm a lot better than this now. But I demonstrated carving these feet a few years ago. But you see the knees are the same. So any questions about that? What we're going to do today is demonstrate more of a pad foot, more of a simple one, which involves a lot of hand tools. But I love 18th century furniture, but I'm not locking myself into just hand tools, and I think that's a worthy calling if people are wanting to do that. But I was raised on production, and a lot of you probably know my dad, Ben Hobbs, has taught here before, but he's a production guy because he was doing it for a living. So he always taught a smart combination of power tools and hand tools, and then finishing everything by hand, so that we could do good quality reproduction work. So let's get into how we do it. Is that you?
Yeah.
So how you do it, you start with something, you draw it, and then you have to make a pattern. So this is, what's interesting, you think about a cabriole leg, that chip footstool there, I would call it a bold design. I would say the knees are pretty strong, the feet are pretty strong, but look how delicate that pattern is. You would say, wow, that's really slender. But when you turn this, when you turn these 90 degrees, when you get it in the body, it becomes much bulkier. So that's something to just remember. So if you lay this right on here, it's the exact profile of what I built there. You can see it in that direction, and then you can see it in that direction. So it's amazing how much bigger it gets when you turn 45 degrees. I was looking for some patterns that I already had with pad feet, and I built a couple of Charleston style easy chairs a few years ago, and I remembered borrowing my dad's patterns, and at the end of the week I said, well, I don't have a pattern, so I copied his patterns really fast, and I think I knocked them out on the bandsaw. But one of the things that's interesting about this is, well, number one, it's a little bit fatter than usual. Almost always when you go measure, it's almost always going to be 2 3/4. Well, this was a big wing chair, so this was 2 7/8. So I'm you know, you have rules, but then rules are only so good until you have an exception. But so this, we're gonna try to build this. Okay. First, we start with a pattern. This has only been bandsawn, and the curves haven't been smooth. If you start with a rough pattern, you're gonna put a rough. Number one, you left your lines right when you cut it with a bandsaw or a scroll saw. You left your lines, so it's a little fat. Then you trace it. Then you leave your line. You might end up making heavy, then heavy, and then heavy, and then when you're done, you're like, why does that one look so delicate and this one looks like, you know, not as elegant? So I always start by just smoothing these out, and it's just a simple tools. So I grew up using these Nicholson files. This is a standard one, a lot of you know, but this is a number 50. This is a 49, and this is a 50. I almost always go for my 49 because the 49 is much more aggressive. One thing, if you buy these off the shelf now, they're super dull. They're horrible. So you need to send them out to get them sharpened, and they dip them in acid, and they come out and they're so much sharper. I'm not a metallurgist or a scientist. I'm just a young construction manager. But when they come back, they're sharp. So if you have these, I love these tools, and they make you know, RUs and some of those really high-end tools. These are not that expensive. I think you can probably get these still for, you guys correct me, but $40, $50 each. But they're not sharp, so you'd have to send them out. And there's a place in California called Boggs Tool that I found. So here, this is plywood, so you have to be careful when you're smoothing things out. You don't want to smooth this way because you're going to dip. You're going to dip in and down. You guys know what I'm saying? So you want to always sort of 45 this and kind of bridge those gaps, and that helps to fair these curves. It's plywood, so you're going to get some rough out. See, the 49 is probably too aggressive on that. So the 50 is a little bit better, and you always have to have nice backup. On this 1/8" plywood, it's only so aggressive. There's only so much you can do as far as getting aggressive, so you have to kind of back off your aggressiveness. I am a relatively aggressive woodworker. Some of you guys may know that about me. So this is just a standard, what do you call it? It's just a standard. Yeah, it's not a rasp, but it's just a file. It's just a half round. And this is a lot. Once you use the more aggressive tools, that helps you get. You see how, if you can see that the line is gone, and you always want to feel it, because if you file a bump in there, then you put it onto your workpiece, you're going to draw a bump, and then you're going to cut a bump, and then you're going to be working on a bump. So you really want to take a few extra minutes to get your pattern in good shape. So even though I am a rush woodworker, I'm going to take a couple extra minutes here. And then at the foot, we've got this pad, which you can see on the Queen Anne piece. There's several different ways to do it, but a lot of times a pad is just a little bead. It's really hard to support and file. And you don't really have to care that much about this part, because this part actually gets turned on the lathe. So when you're on the lathe, you can't really see it. You're kind of doing it by eye. It's been a long time since I've turned one of these on the lathe too, so it's going to be a process of discovery for me as well. You can do that. You could do this completely by hand if you wanted to. You could take a compass and draw a circle, cut that out with chisels. The lathe is the more elegant way to do it, but you could certainly do very acceptable work. So we've already smoothed the front side. So here's one.
Cal, did you say they're those rasps?
These are rasps. I would call them a rasp. And a rasp is much more aggressive than a file, but you know, I've taught a few classes, and a lot of people will go to like Lee Valley, or I think the Arius I see quite a bit. They make really nice, those hand stitch files. They're obviously very expensive. I enjoy those when people have them, but I've never felt like I needed to buy one. Yeah, and then if you really wanted to, you could go to like a little 6-inch file, really fine. But since this isn't going to take a finish or anything, I typically wouldn't do that. So here, this is one place that you can actually sort of see it. You see how this was cut out of a strip of wood, you know, on table saw. So you've got a flat spot right there. I don't know if you can see it. If you can look down it, you can see there's a flat spot there. So you always have to be cognizant of that, and that's gonna ripple out in all your work as well. So this is evident here, and it's also going to be evident after you cut out your blanks. So I always try to take a little extra care to. You can almost feel when it got. You can hear it when it became. So I would feel it here. If you can't feel the flat spot, you're probably pretty good shape. And then sight down it, I can actually see that it's still a little flat. So I'm going to work on that just a little bit. You can sort of sight down it, and you can see the little spot you want to work on, and just put your finger on it, and you're like, okay, that's right there. See, some people might say that that's being a little anal or whatever, but to me that just makes it that much better. and then it gives us a little bit better chance of having a better pattern later. Yes, sir.
When you're working on a pattern like that, would you ever use like a card scraper or a smoke shave?
You could use a spoke shave. I wouldn't think you'd use a card scraper. I think a spoke shave is a great tool to use doing that because it would fare that. In fact, I meant to go grab the spoke shave, so maybe if someone could give me the spoke shave at some point, we'll use a spoke shave on when we cut out the actual blank. So, any questions about the patterns? I mean, I'm a big believer in patterns. I think most period woodworkers, you know, you guys may have heard of Phil Lowe, who passed away a few months ago, like April, and I'm sure his shop is full of patterns. And what's cool is I want to pass the word, but there's a group of people that were his students and friends that are taking the time and effort to digitize all of his drawings because he drew everything. I don't know if you knew that, Wayne. You're still surprised. So I'm actually going to put that out in the newsletter, and they're going to be free to the public. So, which is a pretty amazing thing. I think there was like 380 drawings they're trying to digitize. But Phil Lowe obviously was a treasure trove of information. But every time he made a piece, he had detailed drawings, especially because he was a teacher. So he probably drew things so that his students could take the plans. Whereas my dad has stuff laying all around, but he has taught decent amount of classes, but the whole detailed drawing thing is not really my dad's way. It's more of a rough out a pattern, knock it out, keep working, and then take all your patterns and put a screw through them and hang them up on a wall, which is also a very common thing. You know, thankfully my dad's still young and active, but I want to make sure that when he does move on, that all that information has a little bit of a way to keep going. You know, I think I am following after his footsteps in some ways, but okay. So pattern's in pretty decent shape. Everybody agree with that? Might be a touch fat for my eye, but we can work on that. It's just so I prepared a poplar blank, and if you wanted to paint something, you could do poplar. Nothing wrong with poplar, but if you're doing high style Chippendale or Queen Anne furniture, typically you would not build it out of poplar. But that to each his own. So a couple things about the blank. This doesn't illustrate it that well, but you see this is kind of a quartered, maybe slightly riffed grain. This actually has a bearing into how you want to lay your knee out. So I got this blackboard or this whiteboard. You can see your classic riff song. Okay, if you lay this out with the knee this way, you're going to end up with stripes. Makes sense, and it goes down. That all makes sense? If you do it the opposite way, you cut that out and your knee comes out like this, you're going to end up with bullseyes. So, something to know, it can be, if you take a look at these two pieces, these were both laid out on the quarter, so the grain goes here. And this is a pretty dark piece. You're not going to, it doesn't jump out at you. If it had sapwood or something, it would completely jump out. On the other hand, this one was laid out on the bullseye. And you see how the grain, you have the bullseye there. What you don't want is a bullseye on one and not on the other. If you don't take any care, you'll end up with something that you weren't happy about. There's just something to be aware about. I've actually seen some. There's this amazing corner chair made by John Townsend, who's one of the most famous 18th century woodworkers. some of his work sells for, you know, 7 figures. He has a corner chair that had sapwood and the mahogany on the bullseyes on the knees. He clearly laid it out. So, and you almost never see sapwood in 18th century furniture, or at least the best stuff. So, it's just something to be aware of. I typically choose to go this way, because it just kind of takes that whole highlight of which way is the grain going off. This one, it's not going to necessarily work out that well, so we're just going to roll with it. You know, you have the stock that you have your stock that you have, right? So just something to be aware of. You know, I cut this blank and I made it this morning, and I was like, yeah, that doesn't really illustrate my point very well, but anyhow. So while you've got your blank, usually you want to save the piece above it, and I want to make sure that if we get to it today, you have this piece, and then you have a little knee block that gets added, a little ear. You can see that on there. You want to save this, because then you can cut the ears out of this, and you have the right grain. You know, you have the right. You can. We'll talk about this later, but you can actually take this, cut it out the same way, and you could place it down, and the grain's still continuous. In fact, you can see most of these were pretty successful here. See, this grain is this way, and this grain is this way. So you take a little extra time. See, this grain is this way, and this grain is this way. So you don't want it to jump out. You know, this is a color issue, but you can't prevent that, right? A tree is different down a couple inches down, but the grain does go. So you do your best you can. So there's just little tips that can make the work a little bit better.
Yeah. Was that traditionally the way that they did it? They never took a solid piece to start with?
I have never seen, you never say never, but you almost always see the solid leg with the joinery at the top and the knee block glued on. I'm sure there's exceptions, but that's almost always how you've done it. In fact, you go to the Nelson or go flip through a museum catalog, it'll almost always be that way. Okay, here is interesting. When you lay these out, sometimes I've taught these a couple of times, sometimes it's really can get confusing what's out, what's not. You know, so I always teach, make sure you put the knee to knee or the back to the back to lay it out, because you don't want to lay it out this way and this way, because you can't do that. But believe me, it's easy to get confused. And I'm a big proponent of layout, and I just want it to always be clear. Some of you have had some of my classes. They'll come over and say, "How's this look?" And I say, "Well, which one's the outside and which one's the inside?" I don't know what it is, because they have done like this, you know. And you know why? You know why people do that? Because they're worried about sanding, because they don't use hand tools to take that out. They're worried about sanding, because if you put a big mark on there, it's hard to get it out if all you're doing is running a orbital sander across it. So I always say, okay, this is out. You know, which way is up? Out, up, out. We just picked. No, I just picked. So this is going to be the out. So another advantage to riff sawn is usually you have your sap is on one corner. You can always put that on the inside. This one, in fact, I'm gonna change that. That's not out. But if you change it, clearly mark it out. Right now, you get double marks. I can confuse myself in a heartbeat. So since this sap is a little bit less than that sap, I'm gonna change this. So this one's out and this one's out. Okay. I already squared this off at home, so that the bottom is already squared. So we just lay it on there and mark it. And I almost, just because it's a habit of mine, I put knee to knee. there's the first one. So, one interesting thing, sometimes, your pattern may be a little heavy, so you might run out or whatever. It's not a time to worry about it. That's why using hand tools is cool, because you can just, every one of these is going to be slightly unique. You don't want them to be identical like they came off a CNC anyway, because it's hand tools, right? It's actual woodworking. Not that I have an opinion there. So CNC stuff is amazing what can be turned out, but me personally, I would rather do it with my own hands, not with a computer program. So at this point, one thing that, if you were building a chair or a stool or something, you've got mortises that need to go, because this is the front, so you'd have mortises in the back. So I would go ahead and do my mortises, and I would go over at the mortiser, or however you want to do it. I would cut all the mortises now while you've got a nice solid block. That makes sense to everybody? Let's see if I had any more notes. Smoothing the patterns. Okay. Now we go to the lathe and we turn the foot. Let's see here. I've never used this lathe, so hopefully everything is set up so that we can be successful here. Okay, I need to round this right up to I really just want to turn the pad. I really don't want to get into this part. So you have to be pretty clear. You have to have a way of seeing your marks. But usually if you make a mark here, you can, or even two if you wanted to. That gives you a nice place to stop at. It's been a long time since I've done this. I'm a little nervous. I'm going to screw this up. I did sharpen these this morning, my high dollar chisel protectors. I'm not the world's most experienced turner, so a lot of times I'll turn it on, turn it off, check it. So I'm sure there are other people that, see, I've got a little ways to go before it's all round. Looks like I'm not exactly centered either, which is something that we'll have to correct when we do hand tools. You measure it and you're there, but still it's, if you overdo it a little bit, you're just going to have a smaller pad. And if you're only making one like today, it can be fine. If you're making four of them, that would not be a great. So I know I'm not there yet. Yes, I am. I'm there. So I think I'm a little out of round though. Yeah, so I'm pretty much there. So put the pattern on there. I'm a decent turner, but I turn so infrequently that I have to sort of teach myself each time. So now we're gonna just measure this pad portion. If you're just starting from not, you didn't care about the pattern, sometimes it's nice to make that pad just the width of your parting tool. That way you don't have to worry about it. I didn't do that. Should have. You see that's the pad, and now we just kind of do the bead on the foot, kind of by eye, and it needs to be just a nice round, and you don't want to go crazy in here because you need this curve is going to need to go. There's a line that's not enough, and there's definitely a line that's too far. And if you don't do enough, you're going to have a tough time with all the shaping in the back. So you do want this back indentation. You want that to be established. Feels like it's just a little fat. Never a problem just to double check things, right? I know I'm using the skew the wrong way because I'm scared. Go. I got a big mark there, so might as well take that out. In fact, I'm a little flat right there too, so I just got to go down a little bit. So I'm going to take a little bit of this corner off to help myself a little bit. I want that to be as close to half round as I can. I'm just putting my hand over there so I can see it. This is a little bright, with the white floors and the white wood. So, it looks not that great. Let's try it a little bit more. see, this is the guild. Maybe this is the guild one. Maybe that'll work. I feel like my tool rest is so far away. But that's because we have this big. All right, I'm going to stop messing with it after this one. Okay, that's sort of the idea. At this point, you could take it and sand it up because you can put it back. You can put it back on the lathe later if you wanted to, but when you take all this meat out of here, when you crank it back on the lathe, it's gonna bend, and then everything's going to your angles are going to be a little bit off. So it could take a couple minutes. Typically these pads have a little chamfer, so I'll go ahead and do that. What the heck, we'll sand it just a touch. Watch your knuckles when you do this. I can still feel that skew mark in there. All right, so that's good enough for that. That makes sense. It's pretty easy. I mean, it's pretty easy turning. I think that one thing good about spindle turning, you don't have to be at Anthony's level to. I mean, I would have I would have to do years of training to learn how to do all these crazy boxes in the delicate materials that he turns on, and just. But I can sand a little. I can do a little spindle turning, and when it needs to be a part of the furniture I'd like to build, I can do it. I don't have to restrict what I need because I'm not a turner. You know, that makes sense? Okay, now we go to the lathe, or the bandsaw. There's a few things. I mean, it's pretty simple. One thing that you have to remember, that when you cut this off and then you flip it, you've lost all your lines. So you have to have a method for saving your lines. So there's several methods. Some people will cut all these parts off and then tape them all back. I don't prefer that method. Number one, I feel like that's too slow. Number two, I feel like it's not quite as accurate, or at least it would be open to, like, hey, I taped it and my tape was slipped or whatever. So I typically will bandsaw this and leave bridges. And then, you know, if the grain's crazy, sometimes you can tell that it's coming off a little bit, and then you could tape that back down if you needed to. But we'll do this pretty quickly. Sometimes watching people work is not that exciting. So
Don't make it exciting.
I'm a pretty fast woodworker, but you know, it's easy for this to take a little time. So, couple things. You remember the pattern had a little piece here? There's a little dip. Just don't bandsaw that. If you're trying to have a nice transition to the top of that, anytime you bandsaw that, it's such little work to actually do it with like a rasp. It's way too much risk to try to bandsaw this. And you bandsaw a little in too far, your bead you've got all kinds of problems trying to make that bead work. So this is so much safer. Just stay away from this little ankle. That makes sense to everybody? Here, you're going to have to interpolate a little bit. So just fine to be a little heavy here. Don't get too crazy. That curve comes out at the end of the bead. So I'm probably just going to leave a little meat there and I'll rasp it off. So those are a couple tips on bandsawing. Other than that, it's go to it. Always be careful when you pull those out. You can easily pull the bandsaw off you can pull the blade right off the. Can this come off of here? Oh, you always take it off there. Okay, thank you. So you see that? I left a little bridge there. And I still have my lines on this side. And you'll see, you can just easily pop that off by hand later. Here's another one on this corner here. I want to cut this line all the way to the corner and then leave the bridge on this side, because if I leave the bridge on this side, when I break it off, it'll tear out the fibers down into the knee, and it's something you have to fix. I left some extra length on here, if y'all saw that, wherever my pattern is. So up over here. And that's helpful for like clamping and all that stuff. So really, some people go a little crazy, but I'll probably just start big and then come back to my line. That way I don't start too tight. Okay, one side's cut. This other side, we can just cut it off. Because we don't, see, we've saved our lines and we still have a square box we can cut to. now's kind of the moment of truth. You pop these off and you actually have you can see you're basically there. You're basically there. It's all done but finishing. If you have to. So you see, we've kind of already, that really wasn't all that much work. Will you guys agree? Now we got to make it pretty. Right now it's still, yeah. Have you ever tried the taping before? You would still be taping, and I'm already done. That's the way I look at it. But there's way more than, there's plenty of ways to do lots of things. I'm going to move this bandsaw out of the way if I can. Hunk of glue down there. That way you all can see. This is a little, I kind of rigged this clamping mechanism, and I know this is crude, but I kind of used to my own setup, and I always use these I-beam clamps at home, and my vise is small, so it fits easily. So here, Greg helped me set up a little piece here, little rig, but you know, there's all kinds of clamping mechanisms you can do, but I'm kind of a minimalist, and I have clamps, and I put the clamp in a vise, and that's pretty much. So the better you do on your bandsawing, the easier the smoothing is. So what we need to do is be disciplined, and we need to stay. It's like whenever you go in curves, you have to figure out how do I save my reference lines? How do I not get out in space and then I'm just like grasping for what is right? And this is pretty simple, but it does illustrate that if I started trying to round right away, because I want the ankle to be round and I want it to be back, I want it to be flat here, and then I can decide how round my knee is. If I just started rounding right away, I'm going to start to lose all of my reference faces, and then all my shapes are going to be, all the shapes are going to be subject to being off. So here, again, I grew up using my the 49. My bandsaw was fairly solid, so I don't have a lot of major flaws to fix, but sometimes you might have some pretty major things you have to correct. It's also really easy to get down in here and dig a trench down in the ankle. So you have to be careful that you're twisting this and not digging.
Cal, if you were going to using a canthus leaf or shell, you would just then have allowed extra wood on there? Because you don't do it as an applique.
Yes.
Or you can.
Yes, but typically no. So I've seen that taught, yes, and I think that probably is the technically correct way to do it. But every time I do that, everything looks really fat. So I typically will cut it out the right size and then go from there. So like those shells right there, I did it exactly what you're doing here, and then I cut it into it. And you can lay a straight edge and you can see where it cut into it. But I think if I'd have left more meat, everything would have looked so much more too heavy. And you know, part of our furniture, you want to do good design. You want things to be proportionally pleasing. Some of that is my own taste. Some of that is comparing it to what is the best of. You know, I'm a reproduction guy. I'm an 18th century furniture enthusiast. Now, I like to compare my work to what is generally considered the best, and the best work has an elegance about it. In fact, I continuously surprise myself when I will make something. I'm like, man, I really nailed it this time, and I'll go to a museum and I'm like, man, my work is just a little heavy. It's just not. And I don't want to, false modesty. I'm pretty decent at the craft, but I'm always constantly amazed at how delicate some of the best work was. So typically, I would err the other way, even though the first way is the more technically correct.
Okay, which is the first way? I mean, we're talking about leaving
Okay.
it there and then carving it.
I would say the technical way would be to leave extra, and then inset down. But I usually will get the curve the way I want it to, and then carve in, and then do relief carving from there, because it makes my work less, a little more elegant. This is where a spoke shape can come in, and I haven't tuned this or anything, so this is excellent for smoothing out those curves. This is one of those tools that, for some reason, I've never bought one, so I've never used it much, but every time I use it, I'm like, man, that really works well. So I need to buy one. So here, you all can see right there, I've got a bunch I need to take out there, and I think I talked about that on the bandsaw. You're going to leave some extra stuff there. So I'm going to have to take a few minutes and make sure that's in good shape. And one of the disadvantages of my clamping setup here is that at home I would just flip my clamp up, and I could work on it this way. So we'll work on all of our flats first until we ruin the clamping setup again. So you want to go around each one. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this transition here, because it's pretty critical that this transition, when you're building a piece of furniture, hits the bottom rail there. Because so if you miss that, it's sometimes you have to lower it inside the end. You have to lower this line down into the knee block. And if you're careful, you can, if you have a discriminating eye, like someone like my dad or my brother, you'll be like, oh, you missed that. So that's where like heavy wax and glaze comes in. You just slap it in there, and you can hide some of your work. One thing interesting, when you're curving this part, you want to be careful about this edge, because this is a glue edge. So you want to be careful that you don't just rag across it, and by no means do you want to roll over, because that's a really you want that to be clean. So the good way to work on this portion would be to work this way, because I don't really care if this tears off.
So some of these tools and techniques are actually the same thing as a luthier would use for working on the neck of a violin or something.
Absolutely. Shaping wood is shaping wood. So yeah, I fully agree. So here, there's no way around it. You also have to watch me, but you have to do, remember I said stay disciplined. You have to do all four sides before you can start rounding. Because if you don't, you'll lose your reference points. I typically would feel it, and I also like to look away and feel it, so I'm not influenced by my eyes. Yeah, it's not great, but it's not terrible. There's a bump right there. Some of that is developed with repetition. I'm still not liking that right there. The knee itself, I'll probably just leave like this, because you end up having to shape it after you glue the piece up. But you definitely want to get everything done from the knee down. because you just don't have access. You don't have access to the piece. And, trying to clamp it up. I've done that before, but you try to clamp it up with a full piece. It's just really troublesome. So you do as much as you can while you've got before you glue it up. Remember I talked about that flat spot? Here's where I need to deal with the flat spot. And I didn't bring, did I bring a, that's a tight little curve there. So that 49 won't deal with it. And then the truth is, when you glue that knee block on there, it almost never matches anyway, so you really have to pick the piece up and shape them together. So you don't have to waste a lot of time working on this little armpit or knee pit, whatever you call it. But you definitely want to work on this part. Here again, you could, spoke shape works good, it works well on this, that transition right there. Kind of avoiding the foot. We'll address the foot here. All this time you're wanting really to stay, you want to be at right angles. So if you start to tip all this, you're going to start to, your work's not going to be as, the results are not going to be as good. So just this is pretty stubby leg. It's meant to be on a large wing chair, so it looks a lot stronger. It's a lot beefier than those. So now I've done that, so I really need to start dealing with the foot. I've kind of avoided that. So let's deal with the foot. Got to come down into this ankle here. And you've got a few choices. You can rasp all that. You can try to carve some of it. I'll probably try to carve a little bit of it. By carving, I just mean chisel work. There's no decorative carving.
Typically, the same process on all four legs at the same time, or do you finish one first and get where you want?
I think the smarter way is to do all of them at the same time to stay systematic. Because, sometimes I forget even what tools I used. And this isn't too complicated, but like a carving or something, it makes more sense to me to do all of them the same. That way you're in the same mode, you got the same setup, you're in the same mood. There's typical, that's typically my approach. So here, again, I'm just cutting off, I'm cutting right angle. And this is just simply getting rid of waste. I can eyeball it and see how it's going. And then transition to using the rasp. You can see here, I probably shortchanged how much. I could have gone a little bit deeper on the lathe. So I've got a little bit more work now to get that nice and tight in there. These are not great on a sawing motion on the edges, so sometimes you have to switch to a different tool. You all can probably see that's a pretty, if you look just at the profile, That's a pretty pleasing curve down to the backside of the pad. You see that? It's not too bad. We'll do that over here as well. Sometimes here where, you know, if you put it, your centers weren't exactly center, this comes into, oh, one you have to do a lot deeper, and that's the beauty of hand tools. You get a chance to work on it. I'm not necessarily reliant on a fence or a machine setup. At this point, I would look at both of the backside and say, okay, am I deeper here? Am I deeper there? That way you get a chance to check to see if they need adjustment. Looks like I went deeper on this side because my my turning was a little bit probably not as deep on this side, so I had a bigger flat spot on this side, so I went deeper. So I'll just make a quick adjustment here. And then we need to address the curve, the way the feet. I kind of ignored that for now, so this is just kind of grunt work. I'm adjusting the clamp because it moved a little bit and I was getting out of my right angles. And I could tell on the work piece that I was not being consistent. That's not bad. We'll have another chance to come get it when we do the angles with the rounding. But that's the beauty of the 49. You see, that was a lot of material that I just took out there. You probably saw I probably took an eighth, maybe even 3/16 out of there pretty fast. But sometimes, like a good heavy day of rasping or hand planing, you can really get a nice workout. I used to not be as sore after woodworking, but I probably would be sore tomorrow. Well, you know, I could nitpick that all, but that's probably fairly well. All the profiles are pretty good. Do you guys have any questions about that? Now we need to go and start making it round. So if you look at these guys, I think I said this a little bit before, but on a pad foot, in fact, let's look at this one over here. you're basically round from somewhere around round right there, and you transition to not round at the ears or the knee blocks, and this is right angle here and it's round here. So you think about round right here, and this is actually the round actually continues into the foot. So you don't really have to transition out of round down here. You do on the ball and claw foot. You have to kind of transition back. You have to transition back out into square-ish, even though it's a carved square. So thinking of this round section right here, what we're going to do is concentrate on getting this round right here. And the way they do that, it's not nothing mysterious. What you want to do is think about, okay, round is right here. You can make marks if you want to. You want round right around there. So I'm going to make this section here octagonal. So, and you can do this by eye, but when you make this octagonal, you're going to take a little bit off. This is where you start to lose your reference points, but you guys see what I did there? And then I typically take that line all the way up, and then I taper it into that back corner. So I want to run out at that corner. Then I'll take this line and that runs out at that top corner too. I typically don't go to I typically don't draw this in. I typically just do it by eye, but this is essentially what I'm doing. If you were going to try this the first time, I think drawing it is probably a good idea. Does that make sense to everybody? So now we just have to take off these corners. Again, you can use the same clamping setup. Several ways to do that. Probably the most time effective way is use a draw knife, and it's also one of the more aggressive and fraught with disaster. So you just have to, you start slow and you know where your grain is. Be careful when you get down here because you're not going to be able to continue your grain switches. And it doesn't do rather well in curves. In this kind of piece, it's just as simple to do this. The temptation to want to start rounding. That makes sense because you so want to say like, oh, that looks good, let me round it, it's going to look so great, and then you start to lose your place. So fight the temptation. And you want this to be smooth as well, because that curve, that will be the curve you see when you turn the to bear with me. I need to do all 4 of these. One thing that I like to reference this, the Lathe Marks, and you can see them on the bottom. You reference those, then you know you're putting it in your clamp at the correct angle. Otherwise, you might think you're cutting it at a 45, but you're at 40 or 50 or however bad it might be. I usually take this draw knife just as a quick hog out material. Really easy to get too low. That was actually pretty close to too low right there. You might have noticed that. But I had it under control.
Do you normally prefer mahogany or walnut or cherry?
Yeah, that's the 3 woods I would typically use. If I was doing I like to be somewhat true to, if I was making a North Carolina 18th century piece, it would be very normal to make that out of if I was doing a high style Newport piece from 1765, I would almost assuredly do it out of mahogany. And mahogany and walnut are usually not wrong. So, but there's exceptions to the rules. Always. If you're making something from Connecticut, if you're trying to copy a Connecticut piece, you would almost assuredly be cherry. The rules are in 18th century furniture, if it's weird and if it's cherry, it's from Connecticut. And y'all probably know, I love the scholarship of 18th century furniture as well. That's why I'm a big advocate of the Nelson and going there, and I've made good relationships with the people there. I'm a big advocate of Society of American Period Furniture Makers, which I am the Gateway chapter lead, which we haven't done a lot lately, but I'm trying to get the chapter fired back up. Kind of the COVID Zoom environment, ironically, is helping because we're so distance challenged that it helps people get connected without having to make the investment of driving to St. Louis or something to that effect. You see how that just jumped off? Now I'm monitoring that, and I wasn't too aggressive, but it broke off way farther down than I wanted. I'm still fine, but if I'd have gone a lot more aggressive than that, I could have had nothing. You can come back from almost everything. I could have glued it back on, but it's always good to know where your chips, watch where they go. What's that? That's you see what my workplace looks like.
If you had glued it back on, would you have used acrylate to glue fast, or?
Typically, that would be fine. Typically, I would just use regular carpenter's glue, Type Bond, or Elmer's or something, and I just set it aside and work on the next one. If you're doing a set, a couple hours, and you could probably going after it with hand tools is a little bit, you'd have to make sure it's nice and set. But here, I'm moving pretty fast here, but I'm probably going to have to move to a less aggressive tool here because I don't want to mar up this. I don't want to mar up this pad. So you have to exercise some control. That's just a little too aggressive for that. And this is a good time to come back to a chisel. This file just doesn't do a good job of large-scale material removal. that margin on this 45 over that bead or the pad to be the same as the ones I established on the other side. Again, still fight the urge to round over. I just caught myself wanting to round that over. That's why I said that. And sometimes, a draw knife is essentially a chisel on the handles. Again, check it, make sure you're okay with it, make sure it's not a bunch of lumps. And I know it's taken a little bit to watch me do this, but we're getting there. Use these, work on the flat as much as you can. You can't do that inside an inside curve, but the flat will help you bridge the gaps. If you're up here with the round, you would just be gouging. So use the flat as much as you can. So now it's fairly octagonal. You guys want to pass that around and see what it looks like? Just, we haven't done anything artistic yet, right? We have to have a feel for what's a smooth curve and what's not. We had pretty good band sawing technique to make sure we didn't have to do crazy amount of work in the hand tool area, but the great thing is, it's a fairly complex form. We haven't used any crazy specialized tools. There's nothing up here that is, probably in my tool set, the most expensive thing here was probably the rasp was 45 or 50 bucks. So what's neat is, certainly having the lathe, we have the guild, your bandsaw, but we'll take it from there, and we're basically done except for getting it finished, getting ready for finishing. So you can see it's fairly, I can see it from across the room. It's got a pretty good shape to it. It's got some refinement to go on, but you can see it's very mathematical at this point. It's systematic. You don't have to be an artist to get there. So. Yeah, I still have the reference points. I have a pattern that references those profiles, and I haven't really gone crazy. Yes.
I was wondering about the rasps that you use, because there's a lot of companies that make them. Some are cheaper than others.
Right.
And is there a better quality or one that you recommend?
So I love the Nicholsons, which are pretty cheap, but I would get them sharpened. And I would look up a company called Boggs Tool, Boggs, and I would send them out and have them sharpened. And they sharpen all files too. If you have a file that you love but it's just not cutting like it used to, send them there. And they'll send them back, and they'll be better than new. Yeah, Boggs Tool, Boggs.
If you want to spend some money, you can go to Stumac and get some luthier rasps and stuff like that.
Right. You can go to like tools for working wood or Lee Valley, and you can buy some really high dollar like RU rasp is one that comes to mind. I know there's more. I'm not sure if Lee Nielsen makes them or not. They probably sell like RUs. Or is that right? That's the name that Wayne, you might know some of the other brands. That's the one that comes to mind. A lot of,
reasonable priced one.
What's a ballpark price on bogs to get?
it's been a long time, so I don't really want to say because I don't know. I would think when I did it, it's probably been close to 10 years ago. It was reasonable, but I think I did 4 or 5 files for $20. But that's a complete guess at this point.
Probably the most striking thing about your demonstration so far is the fact that using rasp and files has allowed you to slowly sneak up
Right.
on the edge point. So that means your whole demonstration has gone by without what we would normally think of as, oh crap!
But believe me, I have my old snap moments, but for the most part, like I demonstrated using the draw knife, but if you were going to do your first one, I probably wouldn't recommend that unless you're really comfortable with it. So we're going to take this now. We're going to do the same thing. This is now in octagonal. We're going to knock those down and make it into 16ths. So it's a fast process, but again, I would definitely recommend just taking your time and knocking these down. That's not fast enough. You know, typically I wouldn't do the layout lines on the last one either because my eye can see what's octagonal. But if you wanted to, that would be a way to, you know, woodworking is all about drawing a line and cutting to a line, right? If you can do that, you can do most anything. If someone tells you how to draw a line, and then you know how to cut to the line. So you could do that, and you know that making it in 16ths, it sometimes feels like it's already curved. It's harder to see these facets. You see, it just takes a little bit it doesn't take much to knock those corners down. One thing we're going to have to come back is refine that transition there. So that'll be another step to finalize this. This knee, you can kind of make your knee as sharp or as rounded as you want. There's some freedom there. I typically stick pretty close to make it octagonal here and then run that all the way up and then round it. That's a safe approach. But I've done different things too if you wanted to achieve a different look. You see why this clamping setup is just pretty versatile. You know, that's kind of how I learned to do it. Clamping is everyone has their own methods of doing lots of things. So that's pretty close to in 16ths. At this point, there's no need to go to like 30 seconds or anything like that. You could drive yourself crazy if you wanted to. But at this point, we just need to, now we can round it. Okay, we've been disciplined now we get the payoff. And I just typically take this regular half-round file and just kind of go over it. And now is the first step that I don't really care about my reference lines anymore because I'm just smoothing. Doesn't mean you don't have to be aware of what you're doing, but if y'all have any questions, let me know. I don't want to. I know this demonstration has been a lot about just watching me plug and chug. Now I can do that rounding that I wanted to do behind the pad, behind the ankle to the pad. I really enjoy woodworking. We all do. That's why we're here. But one of my more pleasurable things to do in woodworking is just shaping wood. It's just really kind of fun to go from something that's square to something that is somewhat artistic. Beautiful. Yeah, it's it's very pleasing to turn something that's rough and square into something round and it has a good feel to it. So at this point, it's mostly, okay, what do I feel and what do I need to fix? I think I've gotten close. Got a little bit here. And then I would typically, I'm going to do one more stage of refinement. But if there's some big facets there, they should probably be fixed. We have a minimum of facets now. Let's talk a little bit about this transition. This is probably I would say one of the most difficult. It's like, where do you stop? Where do you start? This needs to be you've got, if you can see, this is a pretty consistent on top of the bead, and that has to peter out to zero. Is that an official word? Peter out, run out. So kind of it's a little delicate. So I would just advocate taking your time. And I don't know that there's any. I just made a bad stroke there. And that little angle can be rounded a bit to something pleasing. That's not bad. I don't know if you can see that. Just a few file strokes. This one doesn't need as much work as that one did. This one seems a little fatter. This side needs a little. I do think, 18th century furniture is not super popular right now. No one really wants. Everyone thinks it's like your grandparents' furniture. But the techniques involved in making things curved or making things carving or making things elegant, I think does apply to all types of woodworking. You know, not every piece of furniture should be limited to just flat and square, or made off a planer and a table saw. I don't love that transition there, but that's pretty close, certainly for a demonstration standpoint. So now okay, where do you go from here? You got to just grab the orbital sander and get it ready for a finish. You got to we need to take it to a level of finishable wood. So start to smooth this bad boy. The best way is using a card scraper. Now these scrapers are ones that fit like in a Stanley number 80, and these are sharpened to a 45 and then turned to burr. These aren't right angle card scrapers. And I know there's two different ways of doing it. I always like these. These are stronger. It takes a little bit of a learning curve to learn how to sharpen these. I don't get it right every time, but one thing I did bring, you can buy different rods, burnishing rods, but I bought this several years ago from Lee Valley. It's not expensive, but it's got a little burnishing rod in there set at the right angle, so it turns it all at the right angle every time. Do y'all all know what I'm talking about? The scraper, you got a piece of wood, just like a blade. You sharpen it to a 45, and then you run it across a burnisher, and that little hook edge, that little piece of metal makes a little hook, and then you can use it, and it's a very useful smoothing tool, and it can get all kinds of perfect for taking rasp and file marks out. It's also great for taking smoothing something. If you're joining two pieces together and you want them to be perfectly smooth across, you can't always get a hand plane in there, and a hand plane might blow it apart, whereas a scraper has got taking such a small shaving that it can go across grain, it can go across figured woods. So the scraper is an essential tool in my tool bag. Everything that I make, unless it's on the interior and it's right off the hand plane, almost everything I make is finished with a scraper. Yes, sir.
So, two questions. One is why the 45-degree angle as opposed to the traditional 90s here? And then secondly, would you normally continue along on this piece before you integrate the black behind the?
So your first question is why so I've tried the 90-degree ones, and I just don't think they make the burr is not as aggressive. It's not as tough. And so, a lot of what I do is because my dad's like Mr. Efficiency. Like everything my dad has done, because he's done it for 30 years and had to make a living on it. And so he's already tried all the methods and like, this is the best. And a lot of times we all learn how we learn, right? I learn new things all the time, but a lot of times if I try different things, I'm like, yeah, my dad was right. So I grew up using this, and this is what I learned. I will say that yes, I would probably go along all the way and complete this leg from the knee down 100% and sand it and everything, because I'll never have it available to be flipped around and manipulated like this. Because if I glued it up, then it's attached to a piece, and then you've got a whole piece you've got to try to move. So, but there's no need to finish from here up, because that all has to be finished once the knee blocks are all glued on. That has to be finished, and they have to be finished together. That makes sense? So you take it from here down, 100% sanded and everything, ready to go. Build the piece, glue the ear on, or the knee, the knee block, and or knee return. There's all these different terms, and then with the piece all together, then you would shape and smooth the knee return. You know, scraper will go against the grain, but it likes it better if you go with the grain. And then when you make curves, you know it doesn't always love this, so you have to get your fingers tight together so you don't have any vibration, and it'll cut pretty smoothly. I don't know if you can see this getting smoothed out. Another thing, like up underneath the knee and everything, it's under the piece. So a little hand mark left here and there is not a bad thing. That y'all can pass this around and kind of look underneath how I left the tool marks. In fact, I'll just walk it around. You see the tool marks underneath? And I think that's actually kind of cool because it shows that I use hand tools. And you never knew it, but it's kind of a cool surprise, and it's a great texture. You pick it up, you're like, oh, that must be done with hand tools. You know, it's a lot more pleasant than picking up and seeing the table saw marks or planer marks. You know? Yeah. See what I'm talking about? And so when I smooth the return to the knee, I actually used a chisel, and then I probably used a file on the edge because I wanted that edge profile to be crisp. Make sense? You can see there's tons of hand tool marks left in there. See that? Yeah, Bill. Gary. There's different parts of the country and parts of the world that were more persnickety about finishing the insides and the interiors. You know, the Newport traditions were very known for everything inside and out was just finished really beautifully. Philadelphia was known for kind of amazing where you could see it and then rough. If you go to like the Nelson, if you ever get a chance to look like at some of the like these amazing French pieces that are beautiful, mahogany, ormolu, gilded, and they're just amazing on the front. And if you open them up, the insides are just rough. It's incredibly crude how they left it. It's just because they were after the effect, and then it was utilitarian. So like we think of dovetails as such a hallmark of craftsmanship now, whereas it's not that the craftsmen didn't care about dovetails in the 18th century, but they were more shown as something utilitarian. So you might see in some amazing pieces of furniture some somewhat crude dovetails, and it's easy to think, well, man, that was a bad woodworker, but then look at all the other stuff they made. I think they just didn't. You know, they were just trying to get things out the door. But I would never want to make something with crude dovetails. My dovetails are not nearly as perfect as some of you in here, Wayne. But I wouldn't want someone to open them up and say, wow, those are pretty bad. And you see how quickly the scraper takes away the material? It's just a really tool to add in your arsenal, especially if you learn how to sharpen it. Because that's one of the sort of the entry concerns on a scraper is learning how to sharpen them. those facets, you can see I'm just going kind of, I see facets and I touch them. And this is making little facets as well, right? But kind of look at them and scrape them right out. Here, switch to going with the grain again. One thing about shaping with a rasp and files, you know that it gives you a nice gauge. If you get the file marks out, you've gone far enough. So it's just kind of a simple check. For flat surfaces, I always use a Stanley number 80 type. It's a scraper that you put in a fixture. Basically, use it kind of like a hand plane, and it takes curls up, and it's just a great way to smooth your work. And then if you can go without sandpaper, but I typically do sand after that. But my sanding is limited to a quick pass with 220, and then I'm done.
But the sharpening is the same for that blade, Cal, if you're using it out of the number 80 or not?
Yeah, I would put this is exactly how I would put it in the number 80. Yep.
Okay.
The sharpening is the same. So that was a quick pass. You can pass that around. You can see how much smoother that is. There's some cleanup work, but you see how it's getting close now. And I'll hit it with a little bit of sandpaper here, and it's poplar. Poplar's not going to burnish like a hard, mahogany or walnut. So let's keep that in mind. But you see, it's gone. A short amount of time, relatively speaking, we went from a block of wood to a pretty elegant Cabriole leg. So, let's see here.
Hey, Calvin,
How are we doing on time?
would you typically sharpen all of your plane or all your scrapers the same way with that 45 and the?
Yeah, I do.
You do?
Yeah.
Rather than 90 and.
I have some oddball scrapers. I have some of those French curve scrapers. They don't work at a 45. Those I would. So anything I would use in this sort of application, yes, I would sharpen it at a 45. But the other ones have their place too. One thing that I want to get better at is, like when I'm carving low relief, you have to lower the ground, and flattening the ground. That's one thing, the next thing I carve, I'm going to really try to work on that, and I think I need to come up with some good scraping mechanisms to scrape that off. That's one place I feel like my work has struggled a little bit. So yeah, it's always helpful to have a few pieces of metal stock. You can file them to the profile of a molding, and then sharpen those at a 45, and those scrape pretty well. Without turning a burr on them, they don't last terribly long, but they still are helpful. You can just sharpen them, completely, sharpen them and buff them on both sides. And y'all probably, some of y'all know, but I grew up in my sharpening is on a belt sander, so I don't do any of this hand stropping stuff. It's way too slow. Rob Young would make fun of me and say all I'm doing is eating up the chisel, but I do a lot of woodworking. I've had this chisel for 10 years, and that's my favorite one. I've still got that much metal, and I've saved a lot of time. But I sharpen that way because that's my way my dad sharpened. So, and I've tried the other ways, and I liked my dad's way. It's faster. I think that's probably it. Do y'all have any more questions about Cabriole leg or anything about the guild or about woodworking? I can do my best.
Yeah, just a quick comment. When you look at a leg in a shape like that, it is totally intimidating to even think about trying to make a shape like that.
Right.
But you did a great job of breaking it down into small steps that even those of us with limited talent can feel like this is something that you could actually do.
I completely agree. And sometimes someone just needs to tell you the steps, because it's, you know, I didn't do it. There was nothing magical about what I did. It was just workmanlike. You know, yeah, it takes a little bit of experience to learn how to use a lathe. It takes some experience to, you know, to practice and using the rasp and feeling flat, you know, feeling a curve to make sure you don't have any bumps. But it is, the steps are all simple little steps. You just put them in a row and just do them, and try to keep the guardrails on as you go, so you don't have the, oh crap, you know. But I can guarantee you I've had as many of those oh no moments as y'all have. So, anything else? Thank you. All right, I worked up a good sweat.